As a part of my personal, not project, but a personal message, I would say, I would like to bring more non-Ashkenazi sources to Judaism and to progressive Judaism. We do have some here. We sing some of the songs that originated in Spain, in some of the non-European traditions. But recently I came across with a book of tales or stories from all over the world, tales of Jewish stories from all over the world. And this one is from Afghanistan. The Jewish community in Afghanistan it's very hard to know where the origin of this tradition or the origin of this community. Some people claim that they go back to the lost 12 tribes, so to the 8th century BCE, but most likely it's either untrue or it's impossible to prove. It's 3,000, almost 2,800 years ago. You can't really prove anything there. But this tale, nevertheless, survived by transmission orally. And there is a book that the author of the book undertook the task of recording oral Jewish stories that people tell. So this one goes this way. It's a long story, but I will retell the most of it and only read actually how it was written down, the last few paragraphs. So it begins with a king who was wandering through the street of his kingdom disguised as ordinary man. So, and then the king comes across a poor Jewish man. And what a surprise! This poor person was singing with joy. The king wonders, how, why the man so poor can be so happy? And he asks this man, and the Jew tells this king in disguise that he earns his living fixing shoes in the street, and that God protects him. The king decides to test this man's faith. You believe in God. It's only because you have a job. The next day, the king forbids anyone to fix shoes in the streets. But when the king returns to visit that night, the poor man is still happy. The Jew tells the king in disguise that to earn money for food, he carried water to people who needed a drink. The next day, the king forbade anyone from selling water. That night, the man tells the king in disguise that he has found work as woodcutter. The following day, the king orders his captain of the guard to bring all woodcutters to guard the palace. More than that, they are given uniforms. They are not given uniforms and swords, so that they need to provide it themselves, and they will not be paid for this work. The king wonders how the Jew will manage this time, and that night, the Jew tells the king in disguise how he sold his new sword for food, probably to one of the guards, and carved a wooden one for himself to take its place in the sheath. This way, he will still look protected, even though it's not a real sword. And he's still singing praises to God for taking care for him. The next day, the king brings forth a prisoner, and commands the Jew to execute him. If the Jew refuses, he will be punished himself. The king invited the large crowd to watch the execution, knowing that the sword that the Jew has in his sheath is not real. The man stood up in front, and this is the original. Now I'm beginning to read the story as it was written down. The man stood up in front of a large crowd and prayed silently. After this, he lifted his eyes to heaven and said in a loud voice, "My God, you know me very well, and you know that I've never killed anyone in my life. And now I am commanded to do so by force. Please, God, let me at least make sure that this man is guilty. If this man in front of me is guilty, let me take my sword from this sheath and cut off his head in a single blow. But if he is not guilty, let my sword turn to wood as a sign of his innocence." And by then all the eyes were on the Jew, and he reached into his sheath and pulled out his sword and held it up high. And when everyone saw that it was wooden, the crowds gasped and then clapped and cheered. So they assumed that a miracle had happened. And the story ended well. The king saw the wisdom of the Jew and said, "Do you remember me? Come closer. Look at my face. Do you remember me?" Oh, the Jew said, "You are my guest for the last 4 nights." He said, "Yes, that's right. But from now on until the rest of your life, you will be my guest." And this Jew, this story becomes the advisor to the king. So what's the story about? Probably about courage, faith, change in attitude, maybe about test. For me, most importantly, this story is about the perspective. One can see the challenges of this world as never-ending burden. But they can also become an opportunity. In a famous joke, 2 entrepreneurs came to a poor country to see potential for opening a shoe shop. You probably know this. And one, a pessimist, sends back a report saying, "There is no way we can sell any shoes here because almost nobody wears any shoes." And the other one, the optimist, says, "There is a great opportunity here. Nobody wears any shoes." So a lot depends on perspective. So why I brought it here? This week's Torah portion has this phrase, this verse. "Ve'achalta ve'savata u'verachta et Adonai Elohecha," and when you have eaten and been satisfied, you should give thanks to the Eternal One, your God. Al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach, for the good land given to you. So the commentators of this verse ask, why is this commandment given at this point? And they suggest, many commentators suggest, Moses was deeply worried about the Israelites after they entered the promised land. So at this moment, Moses and the people are at the end of their journey, at the end of their 40 years of wandering, but not yet entered the land. They haven't yet entered the land. So Moses is thinking, how would people behave when they enter the land? What would they have? And he feared that they would settle in the land, enjoy its fruits, and become too comfortable and conclude that they owed nothing to their history or their ancestors or to their God. Moses presumed they would conclude that they alone were responsible for the harvest that they collected. For this reason, say the rabbis, Moses warns the Israelites not to eat without pronouncing blessings of thanksgiving, and not to enjoy the fruits of the land without acknowledging God with words of gratitude. Talmudic rabbis go as far as to compare eating and drinking without reciting blessing or prayer of thanks afterwards to stealing from God. So strictly speaking, this verse, legalistically and formally speaking, this verse is the foundation for reciting grace after meal. Rabbi said, you have eaten and been satisfied, so after you've eaten and you liked it, you're not hungry anymore, then you have to give thanks to God. But the most logical human condition is to say thank you before you eat. I mean, think about it. What do we teach our children? When you are given something, you say thank you and then you eat. That's the most logical. Why do you say thank you after you've eaten? As well, in addition. And it is given to remind people not to take their comfort and satisfaction for granted. The underlying theme of this week's Torah portion is a remembrance of many past events that happened to people. Torah commentators ask why Moses needs to remind people about the rebels, wars that they had to fight, unpleasant past experiences, and the long and tiring journey through the desert. Now, at this moment, when they are about to enter the land, you need to be the opposite. You need to inspire people. You need to raise people's morale. But why remind people of the horrible past? Haven't we already read about all these events in the books of Exodus and Numbers? Yes, we have. We know all of it. Why do we need to be reminded of the past at this moment, at the end of the journey? So the 13th century Spanish commentator Nachmanides says that such recollections place pride into perspective. And it's important precisely at the moment of celebration. Prosperity and comfort can become as big a test of humanity as poverty and tragedy. So therefore, the knowledge of historical events moderates human self-centered flattery. History humbles people. It prevents arrogant assumptions about human achievements. Moses shows people that the historical perspective to demonstrate that their triumphs should not only be seen as the work of their hands, but the result of hard work and sacrifices of their ancestors, and an element of luck that many people called God. Albert Einstein once said, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. I think living without a sense of miracle and large purpose and large story is to see life's challenges as burdens. But living your life with an understanding of miracles and with hope for miracles is to see them as opportunities, to see every challenge as an opportunity. The same is true about our achievements. We must never forget the sacrifices and guidance that have brought us to this point. As we enter this Shabbat, may we all find the strength and perspective to navigate our lives with humility and a profound sense of gratitude for what we have. However little you have, there are always people who have less. Shabbat Shalom.